Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our LinkedIn Live. We'll just give a couple of minutes to everyone to trickle in and then get going. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm Megha Chaudhary. I'm Head of Global Marketing and Alliances at Course5 Intelligence. Welcome and thank you for attending this webinar on bottling the AI ocean, bringing transformative, responsible AI into your organization. In this session, our distinguished speakers will explore the criticality of responsible AI in enterprise AI implementations and frameworks for AI governance. They will also discuss the imperatives of content modernization in order to drive reliable, trustworthy AI initiatives in their organizations. Leveraging AI securely and effectively is the key to the next stage of organizational transformation. I'm sure you'll find useful takeaways today to drive your AI journey forward in a powerful and sustainable way. Now, a little bit about the host company, Course5 Intelligence. Course5 Intelligence Limited focuses on helping organizations drive digital transformation using artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, and insights. Course5's AI-driven platforms and IP-led solutions are supported by industry-specific domain experience and the latest technologies. We aim at supporting and enabling organizations to solve complex issues relating to their customers, markets, and supply chain at speed and scale. Course5 combines a multidisciplinary approach to data integration across structured and unstructured data sources to help businesses grow through informed decision-making. I'll bring your attention to a couple of housekeeping items now. We will have a recording of this session available on LinkedIn event page for those who have registered for the live. We will also send a webinar recording and a post-webinar summary highlighting the key takeaways. You can continue the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag Organization Advancement Through Responsible AI anytime. We'll have a total of 45 minutes in this fireside chat, and we'll have last 15 minutes dedicated to Q&A, but you can post your questions in the comment section anytime. In case they do not get answered during the webinar, send us your questions at info@course5i.com. We have 45 minutes, like I mentioned, and I hope you all stay with us through the webinar. Now, a little bit about our presenters for today. I'm going to introduce you to our esteemed presenters. We have Pedro Uría-Recio as our first presenters. He's the Chief Analytics and AI Officer at True Corporation. True Corporation is a leading telecom company in Thailand. Pedro oversees analytics and AI for the digital part of the business. He runs a business unit that uses telecom data to create enterprise solutions for advertising, credit scoring, and consumer intelligence. Pedro is also the Asia ambassador for Finnovating.com, the first global AI community and deal matching platform for tech companies, and a visiting lecturer of AI in the business at Chulalongkorn University. Prior, Pedro was Group VP Analytics at Axiata Group, a Malaysian digital and telecom conglomerate in 6 Asian markets. With a strong interest in entrepreneurship, Pedro is also a business angel and was an entrepreneur in residence at Antler, a Singapore-based VC studio. Pedro is an official member and contributor at the Forbes Technology Council and a 2-time TEDx speaker. He's been recognized as one of the 2020 top 100 innovators in data and analytics and won Cloudera's 2019 Industry Transformation Award. Finally, Pedro is a Chicago Booth MBA graduate and a certified AI professional. Welcome, Pedro.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pedro. And I'll welcome our second speaker, Anis Merchant. Anis Merchant is the Executive Global Vice President for Global Consumer Growth and Success. Anis leads the global digital applied AI and research business at Course5 Intelligence. He has guided sizable digital transformation initiatives for numerous global Fortune 500 clients across various industries. Anis's current role at Course5 chiefly involves guiding product innovation, setting the go-to-market strategy, scaling the global business, and building a strategic partner ecosystem. Anis is passionate about helping companies grow through the innovative application of AI in digital and insights. Anis is a certified in Lean Six Sigma and an MBA from NIMS, Mumbai, and executive education from Harvard Business School. He is part of 3AI and Analytics India Magazine Technology Leadership Council. Now, without further ado, welcoming Anis, and I'll give the floor to our esteemed speakers. Let's dive straight in.
Thanks, Megha. It's a very interesting and a fun time right now when I look at the entire space of AI largely. Every day when you wake up, you wait for some new or interesting news coming up. It's
Yeah.
almost becoming like a daily soap. When you watch it on TV, I don't know, Pedro, if you agree. Today, LinkedIn itself is full of news with Gemini's new launch and where things are going. And when I think about the topic for today, bottling the AI innovation and bottling the entire AI aspect, uh, I'm just wondering, how do companies even are thinking about bottling it out? When there is so much of innovation happening on a daily basis. In the last 1 year, it's almost an anniversary for ChatGPT right now when it got released. Is the first year anniversary. So, before we get into everything, what do you think about the current environment? There's so much of flux, so much changing. People don't know what's going to come on next. What's your thought process around this entire process?
There is so much innovation going on with generative AI and what is going to come next, right? Because big companies, Google, OpenAI, startups continue innovating, and we're going to see much more of this over the next few years, right? And at some point, corporates that are always a little bit behind are becoming a little bit confused. What should I implement? What should I not implement? What should I wait a little bit more time so that it becomes more mature? How do I handle the risks, right? And this is what this webinar is about, right? How to implement AI in a responsible way. And yeah, it's understandable that companies like in telco, in financial services, in insurance, in industries that are a little bit more incumbent, have these kind of hesitations and these kind of questions about how to proceed.
This hesitation, does it also, in your perspective and in your mindset, brings in a lot of wait and watch kind of mindset?
I think so. I believe that a lot of companies are deploying or implementing pilots of language models and different generative AI solutions, but they are pilots and they are waiting a little bit to deploy them at scale, right? Experimenting is always good, and a lot of companies are doing that. Very, very big companies. So we did that in True, and many other companies are doing that. But deploying it at scale is more complicated because there could be risk, right? You have all these risks of hallucinations, bias, etc., and how you handle that, right? And I think that's one of the questions that a lot of chief data officers and chief information officers and also CEOs are thinking about.
And I completely agree with some of our clients when we talk to them. They just got started, and some of them were laggards, right? Telcos, banking, and a lot of other sectors have been. Analytics has been there, been done for more than 2 decades, but there are a lot of other industries who are just getting started. They're just getting
Manufacturing, retail, offline retail. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of industries are getting just started.
Yeah, and they're dealing with the first world problem, which is data. They are not even thinking about analytics. They are not even thinking about sophisticated AI. Now, while they are at that journey, you have those companies which are at that one end of the spectrum, and then you have companies like yours who are in the telco, who've been doing analytics for many years, who've been using AI. All the fun stuff we talk about, bots, we talk about automated response, and all of that. That's been there in the telco space. Whenever I call up my telco company, I do hear those bots, and they are smarter, and they're getting smarter day by day. And there is use of AI, right? There's a lot of personalized offers which come my way today within the telecom space. But there is that underlying principle of, okay, how much creepy it can be for me to get personalized, right? I'll give you my real example. Whenever I'm at the airport, whether I'm flying domestic or international, I get a message from my telco provider. I will not take the name who, that hey, you're traveling internationally, subscribe for our international travel pack.
Yep.
Now I didn't give my location to them. Now they can track my location because they have the towers and they know where I am. So you
And
know,
your web history as well.
yeah, and my travel history as well, right? Wherever I've traveled and I've used the network as well. So when you think about responsible AI, what is that fine line you can draw and you can't draw? Because that's a question, and every industry will be different. What that line looks like,
It's,
in my perspective.
it's very difficult to draw a line for many reasons. The first reason is that when we think about ethics in general, forget about AI, just ethics. There is not a standard or a universal definition of ethics. It depends on cultural environments. If you go to the countryside, people on the countryside are going to have a very different definition from people in a big city, right? If you think about people 50 years ago, they thought in a very different way from us. And people 50 years from now are going to look at us and they're going to think, how could they behave this way, right? And they are going to think that some of the things we are doing are reproachable, to say the least, right? So there is not a standard definition. Now, when you go to AI, it's even worse because we are experimenting so much change and there is so much more change to come that we don't know. We don't know what the risks are in the short term or in the long term, and we don't know how to react at them as a society. I mean, right? As a society, we just don't know. We are just starting to get familiar with data protection, the concept of data protection, right? What is data ownership? People understand what it means to own a car, to own a house. You don't know what it means to own your data, and people are starting to get familiar with that, thanks to the regulation that came after 2016 with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, right? The GDPR and all countries almost countries started implementing data protection laws after that time. But now in AI, we as a society, we don't know how to take it, and we are just learning.
You brought out a very interesting thing, that you can't draw the line, and there are a lot of inherent risk and ethics. I always give this famous example that if you give a syringe to a doctor, to a terrorist, to a police person, or to a child, the outcomes will be very different, but the tool is the same.
Yep.
And same is with AI, right? It's a tool, it's a technology, but the usage and the holder is going to be all dependent. But just taking a fundamental step, you spoke about data. Like, we are still getting accustomed to understanding what is data, what does data protection mean, does it mean to own the data. Now, responsibility starts there before even you talk about AI, or before even you talk about large language models. So when you look at it, data, are there thoughts about how can you be responsible as a company? Maybe the consumer is not responsible. I've accepted all cookies, or I have gone ahead and signed
Yeah.
up to apps which I shouldn't be signing up, and I'm giving out my data, I'm giving out my PII information to companies which I shouldn't be, or my information is completely leaked out in dark web. How do you as an organization, or what's your perspective as an organization, you start becoming a little bit more responsible from a
Well, I
data?
mean, there are data privacy laws, right? There are data privacy laws like GDPR, which has inspired many other data privacy laws. I am in Asia. In Singapore, we have PDPA, Personal Data Protection Act. In the US, it's a little bit different because it's not like a country level kind of regulation is industry and state level, right? But anyway, in spirit, they are very similar. And the most complicated aspect of data regulation for a corporate, for a bank, for a telco, for an internet company is consent. It's always consent, right? Getting the consent of customers in order to share their data with somebody else, or in order to perform certain activities like marketing campaigns with that data, right? That's the most complicated thing, because the logistics of getting that consent is well, requires a number of IT systems that for a more traditional industry is not always easy, right? So that's number one. Number two, the other thing that is quite important is once you have the consent for the data in your company, you have to protect it inside the company. I'm not talking about sharing it with other parties, but inside the company, right? Oftentimes, data in a company is shared from a department to another department. People that don't really require to have personal identifiable information, like marketing people, could see that personal identifiable information, right? So there are a number of things that should be done, which is number one, access control, and number two, anonymization of the data, right? At the very minimum, right? So I will say these things: consent, access control, and anonymization are the three fundamentals that any company should implement.
No, good point. Now that's the source data. Now when every company today is processing that data and building further attributes. Let's say about me. Now, the person who's building those attributes, going back to the ethics and going back to the analogy of the syringe, I may build very biased attributes about me versus you, right? Based on my usage, based on my race, based on my payment terms, all of that, right? Now, the data can have now inherent bias, as an example. So when I look at it, there are certain checks and balances which you can do, but how much can you do that, right? Like you said, there is that fine line, because there will be certain things required, because that's what the data is saying. And unfortunately, a profile like me would have created a a scenario within that company which have caused the company to look at every person like me with the attributes which I depicted to that company to be typecasted or to be put into that kind of category. So how do you recommend, or I have certain thoughts but would love to hear you, like what is that refresh process of the attributes, because the biases can create a lot of issues. It's made one is the
Okay,
source data and then the other is the generated attributes.
so bias is a very relevant aspect, very very much in the newspapers and in the media today. So it's something that worries people quite a lot, and it's very complicated. um, so what is bias, right? Because imagine that the case of segmentation, where you have said there is a particular outcome, and depending on a physical characteristic, that outcome depends on that physical characteristic. And when you look at the data, it depends on that physical characteristic. And then from a philosophical point of view, you can find that is unfair, right? But when you look at the data, the behavior really depends on that characteristic, right? So there are two possibilities here. One possibility is that either the data or the algorithm is wrong, which is possible, or maybe your philosophical standpoint is also wrong. I mean, I don't know. I'm just talking in general, right?
Yeah.
I give you an example of one particular case that happened to me around 10 years ago in a particular country in Asia that is a multiracial country. And the question was analyzing credit behavior, the credit scoring of people. And when you look at the data, you find out that one of the factors that algorithmically influences the credit score is race.
Wow. Okay.
So what do you do about that, right? Because you look at the data and it's there, right? What do you do about that? Well, I mean, one possibility that you could do is you can take race out of the algorithm. But guess what? There are gonna be other parameters, other features that are gonna replicate that behavior anyway. Like, for example, language. If this was a country with multiple races, and each one of the races had different languages. So there is a correlation between the two, right? So even if you take one, that behavior still persists in the data. So it's complicated to, number one, identify that there is bias. Well, I would say, number one, define that bias. Number two, identify it. And number three, act on it. From a data science perspective, or from a chief data officer perspective, right, is complex. All ethical aspects are complex. And people that in general have the strongest opinions are people who have not really thought that much about it.
Nice one. Yeah. And this is where my perspective is, specifically on bias and why biases creep into the data, is because that line which we've been talking about gets crossed, right? You want to know more about the consumer, right? In a banking space or in the healthcare space, KYC is done. But in an all industry space, everybody wants to know more about me, my family, my life history, my race, to your point, all of that. And is that really required? And would that create certain biasness in my approach?
Well,
perspective.
Correct. I mean, is that really required? I mean, for example, if you think about a bank, the bank is going to see your transactions. They could classify you according to those transactions. And most of them do.
Yeah.
Right? A telco is going to see your web history. It's just part of the service they are providing. There is no alternative. Even if you encrypt the website traffic, which is encrypted, they still see the URL, because without the URL, they cannot serve the website.
Yeah.
Right. So there are data that you are sharing just because otherwise it would be impossible to get the service. Additionally, there is other data that you are sharing voluntarily, right? Because, I mean, like in Facebook, etc., right? And all that amount of information, that takes me to the next aspect, which is not bias. And I believe this is very important, and I don't think there is an awareness about this, which is manipulation and freedom, right? So a company, based on the amount of data that they have, they could steer you in certain ways that might or might not be in your best interest.
Yep.
Right. And at the same time, I was saying before that society in general starts to understand a little bit more about data protection. I don't think they understand that well, or we understand that well about protection of freedom, protection of free will, right? And I'm going to give you an example. This is an example that is maybe a little bit futuristic, but I think it could happen in the future. Imagine an insurance company with whom you are sharing data in order to decrease your premium, and you are sharing your Fitbit, and you are sharing, well, other kind of information, right? And this insurance company gives you recommendations about doing exercise, about certain behaviors that will improve your premium.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, your insurance premium is related to how successful you are in life, because the more successful you are in life, the more you will spend in a service that is not essential, like insurance, right? Now, the most important influence in somebody's success is the people that you meet, is your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly the people that you meet when you are young. So could potentially an insurance company in the future want to steer you to meet certain people and not meet other people? Strictly speaking, the net present of future premium that they are going to get from you depends on that. And probably your success in life depends on that as well. But would you want to give away that decision to an algorithm? Would you want to give away the decision to an algorithm about what friends you meet, what jobs you take, who you date? Probably you wouldn't, even if, algorithmically speaking, in general, you will be better off by giving those decisions to an algorithm. So it's complex. And and I think manipulation is an important aspect that we still don't completely know. I mean, think about OpenAI, right? I mean, think about ChatGPT. Most people are taking ChatGPT. I mean, my students at university just copy paste, and sometimes they don't even understand, right? So most people are taking what ChatGPT says, which is based on correlations. It's not based on root cause analysis. It's not based on causality. ChatGPT doesn't understand causality, and they are taking just as a given. And so there is a potential for manipulation that is there, and I think it's important to at least recognize.
Oh, interesting. And Tahir, if I am reading his name right, has asked a very interesting question, and which was coming to that particular point, Pedro. I think it's also like if I look at listed companies when they are trying to make any serious changes, they ask for ballots, they ask for public opinion or shareholder opinion, as an example, that these are the things we are planning to do, or these are the things we are focusing on. So, today companies are forming responsible AI structures within their organization. They are getting legal teams involved. They are re-looking at their governance policies, things which they declare on their website, yada, yada, yada. There are a lot of things happening from a legal front. But those are what I would call as facades, right? The real action, like you and I have been discussing about data and biases and rules, still need a lot of work. So is there a future, and when I say a future, probably in the next 18 months, where a stakeholder community gets involved, and it's not just only within the company, but also external, like consumers participating, a body, not a consumer body, which represents consumer interest, coming part and guiding the team that what should be what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, like you just gave an example of.
Yeah, I think it will start happening, but in order for that to really happen, we will need a catalyst. We will need an event that triggers that. And in data protection, it was Cambridge Analytica, right?
Yeah.
And sooner or later, something will happen that is going to raise awareness, right? I don't know what it will be, but is something will happen that is going to raise awareness from the public, right? But anyway, what companies can do or companies are doing at this moment so far? Well, number one, you can create an ethical advisory board, a committee where you are involving domain experts inside the company, maybe from outside the company. Some companies even have a chief ethics officer, which you have to be careful about it, because I have seen some chief ethics officers that are ornamental,
Yeah.
in the sense that they are there, but they don't matter in the big scheme of things. And you wouldn't want that as well. You would want that person to steer conversations that are relevant. You don't want to make that person ornamental, and you also don't want to make that person extremely decisive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think at this moment, what matters is to have the conversations, because, as I'm saying before, the speed of change in data and analytics and AI is just going to accelerate, and we are going to change our view of a lot of things, right? So when we write AI ethics policies, those policies have to be adaptable. And maybe today we think in one way, and 18 months from now we are taking another approach, right?
Yeah.
We just don't really know exactly how things are going to unfold, right? So, for example, there are drafts about AI policies. I think the first one was the European Union, and they drafted something that classifies risks, different levels, and identifies certain practices as a very high risk. I'm not sure if this is the right wording they use in the draft. And some of those are things such as face recognition. They identified as a very high risk
Yeah.
technology, right? And they also provide some guidelines about how to handle generative AI, in the sense that if some content has been generated by AI, they recommend to label it as generated by AI. They recommend to show what is the data that was used to train that, and what I would say, the supply chain of that algorithm, or the supply chain of that content, right? Which, imagine, we don't have it yet, but I think it will be quite relevant. It will come. You generate some text, an essay, an article with generative AI, and in the same way, when you go to a scientific document, and then you have quotes, and they say one, and here you have the source, two, and here you have the source. So there is a lineage of why some things have been generated that way and where it comes from. That kind of track record, I think is it will start to be important, particularly in certain industries, right? And maybe not in every industry, but in certain industries, financial services, for example.
Yeah. No, and just switching gears, and there's something which I want to definitely share my perspective on is, when we talk about all these LLMs which they've been trained on, because it's so high in the air. We talk about responsible AI, and I was in a meeting about a couple of weeks back where there were a couple of representatives from UN who were trying to understand what kind of policies can work in India and how should India adopt responsible AI practices. One of the questions which I asked, and we don't have an answer yet for it, most of these LLMs, how much global coverage from a data perspective has been undertaken to train these LLMs? Because today, if India or Thailand or Singapore or any other country wants to adopt any of these LLMs, how are they representing that specific country? Or
I'm
that,
not sure.
yeah,
I mean, if you ask me about Google and OpenAI, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what is the representation of content from outside the US that they have. Having said that, what I think is going to happen in the future is that bigger companies, are going to start using their own LLMs trained on content more and more, right? So they are going to train maybe the later stages, the later layers of the neural networks, of the LLM, on content that is specific to the company. Maybe content that is specific to the customers, content such as the product catalog of that company.
yeah,
And I think this is what is going to happen more and more. I think many, particularly bigger companies, will train their own models, because it's starting to be more and more simple. There are even solutions at this moment that allow a company to evaluate different possibilities of language models for a particular use case. Let's say customer service in an airline, for example, right? To evaluate different possibilities, you have OpenAI is not the only one, right? You have open source language models like Llama, etc., and make modifications that suit that particular company. Modifications that you will do by changing the model. You can also have some more simple modifications through prompting, right? There are different ways of customizing the language models, but I think bigger companies will customize more and more. And at some point it will come, I wouldn't say a commodity, but something that is much more extended.
Sure. Pedro, I know we are almost on time, and 2023 has been a roller coaster ride when it comes to AI and for all of us who are in this industry. Can we call ourselves experts today? The answer is no. We are still babies in this industry, right? We are still being born every day, the type of innovation. But one last thought which I would love for you to share is, what are you most looking for in 2024?
I don't know if these, I'm going to tell you a few things, a few areas of development in AI that I find very promising, and I'm very excited about them. I don't know if they will come out in 2024, but I'm going to tell you about some of the things that I think are going to be quite important, right? Number one is causality. AI algorithms that understand causality, that understand not only correlations, but something being the cause of something else, right? I mean, this is something that we have been trying, AI scientists have been trying since the 50s, because AI is not a new thing. but that will start developing soon because there are a lot of people in this. Second, I would say is how to train AI algorithms using less data. If a human had to read all the amount of text that has been used to train a large language model, it will take you thousands of years. But you didn't take thousands of years to learn how to write or to read, right? So how can you train language models or any other AI with much less data? That will be number two. Number three will be synthetic data.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of one of the ways of training algorithms, particularly when it comes to content moderation, is reinforcement learning by human feedback. So there is a human that is saying, hey, this is correct, this is not correct. Hey, this is a little bit incorrect from a social standpoint. Don't say things like that. Well, these kind of things are done by humans, but a human cannot do it fast enough.
Yes.
So how do you do it with synthetic data, that data that is generated by AI that will make it faster, right? These are some of the things. The other thing is self-improvement. How do you make an AI algorithm that is able to improve itself? These are a lot of areas of research that now that are slowly opening, speeding up towards general AI. And I don't know. I don't know when they are going to happen, but they will probably happen in the next few years.
One of the couple of interesting things which I am looking forward to, and probably I see that it may happen in next year or at least in the next 18 months, because there's so much of focus on responsible AI, there will be a standard which will come by, which companies would be looking forward to. If these standards are not, like today, Gemini, when got launched, there were certain standards it was benchmarked, right? And it clearly called out these benchmarks. So
that is quite interesting.
Right.
And let me just take 1 minute on that. There are a few companies that are thinking about how to manage AI, how to manage the risks of AI.
Yes.
And there are a few people that are thinking about that. Certainly, there will be hopefully an equivalent of GDPR for AI. We hope so. And the European Union, being the European Union, probably will do it, right? But they will need an event to trigger that.
Yes.
That's how politicians are, right? Uh, but there are a few things that I find quite interesting. So OpenAI is working on something that they call super alignment,
Yep.
which is how you align a potential super intelligence that might come, how you make sure that potential super intelligence is aligned with human values. And they're using synthetic data. They say that they are going to dedicate around 20% of the budget starting in the next 4 years. So it's quite something. They announced it a few months ago. Another way of thinking about that is there is another guy called Mustafa Suleyman. He's one of the founders of the AlphaGo,
Yep.
right? With this algorithm that became so famous in 2017 when they won in the game of Go. So he has outlined a methodology that is called containment, about how to contain risk of AI, and he has 10 points that are very, very holistic, and they cover from companies to government to society to technological approaches to switch off an AI in case it is necessary. It's quite holistic, quite interesting. And then there is another approach that this one is driven by the chief scientist of Facebook. His name is a French guy. His name is Yann LeCun, an eminence in the area of AI, considered one of the forefathers of AI, right? And he's thinking about open source as a way of really making sure that by making it open source, a lot of people can look at it, and making sure that AI is really aligned with the best interests of humanity. These are three areas where these three people, these three companies are working. I find it quite interesting, and I think it's important to start thinking about these topics because this is just going to accelerate from now, and we have to start thinking about how to handle the risks.
There is one question which Anuj has asked: what systems, practices, or methodologies can you adopt when you're thinking
Yeah.
of deploying AI systems? Now, Anuj, a couple of thoughts. So, when you think about AI as a larger umbrella, we've been last few minutes we've been talking about Gen AI, right? Depending upon the type of AI systems, there are already practices which you can deploy. Now, if you think about LLMs, today there is techniques like RAG. How do you deploy RAG practices, or how do you ensure that you're building red teaming practices, or you're building a service layer over your LLMs. I don't want to get into too specifics. It will get too detailed and probably will take a lot of time. But there are these practices which you can do specific to your LLM deployments. But when you think about AI, the way we were dissecting, if you look at your entire value chain of AI systems, whether it's your data at the data layer, at the processing layer, as well as at the final output, you can have right system checks and balances, right toll gates, right outliers, and inliners both, to ensure that the system is checking before it goes live or before you deploy it in front of a consumer or in front of anybody. So there are these practices. Happy to go in detail. You can reach out to us, either me or Petro, and we'll be happy to discuss that more in detail.
Let me add on that, Anis, just very briefly. Well, number one, there is content moderation.
Yes.
So content generated by AI, content moderation, that is what is called reinforcement learning by human feedback, as I mentioned before. So that's one important thing. Other tool that you can use is holistic threat modeling. So measuring and modeling the bias, measuring and modeling manipulation risk, measuring and modeling maybe social engineering, and being able to measure it in real time and have it in a dashboard. Right. So there is also that. There is what I mentioned before about the supply chain of where the data comes from and how it is generated, how the content is generated, etc., etc. So that lineage is important. I mean, a lot of companies are working on that for other algorithms, for credit scoring, etc., banks. But it's important to do it also for generative AI. And also, something that is being done quite a lot is what is called adversarial testing. So in the same way, when you have a new product and you test it and you try to look for situations that are complicated to see the product really works. So what you should do as well is simulating situations that are complex from an ethical point of view and see how the algorithm is reacting to that, and understanding whether it works in the way you want or it doesn't work in the way you don't want, right? So that is dynamic adversarial testing. So these are a few things that some companies are doing.
Great. Now, Pedro, this has been a fascinating conversation. I think both of us can continue on this conversation because of the passion and the zeal we have on this topic. I'll just open it up for any questions coming in from the audience. If there's, if the audience would like to ask any questions to both of us based on the topic we've just discussed, I think we'll open it up for the next 2 minutes so that we can end the session on time. No, while we wait for the audience to ask the question, there's one more interesting thing which I'm looking for. You spoke a lot about European Union. I believe strongly that there's going to be a central governing body, probably by UN or by IMF or by World Economic Forum, somebody like them, which is a much more global authority rather than just focus from Europe, who defines this, who defines an LLM, a legal LLM which checks all other LLM. So that's something which definitely would.
I understand. I'm a little bit skeptical about this.
Okay.
And the reason is, from a geopolitical point of view, the world is becoming more multipolar than 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's becoming more regional. And there is a possibility that the world where we are going to be in, let's say, 10 years, 20 years, you have a regional superpower in Asia, another regional superpower in the Middle East, another regional superpower in, and those might or might not always be aligned. So international cooperation in the matter of setting standards and the topic of containment, which is one of the aspects, one of the 10 points that Mustafa Suleyman mentions in his book about containment. I don't know. I don't know if it will be possible, given that we are going into a more multipolar world.
Interesting. No, on that note, I see Megha on the screen, so I think she's calling it as a timeout. Megha, and thanks a lot.
Actually, I wouldn't want to. Thank you, Anis and Pedro. That was really an interesting conversation.
Thank you very much.
Actually, I learned quite a few new things. And, just as we've seen Chief AI Officer as a new role that has come up in the last few years, I won't be surprised to see Chief AI Ethics Officer as one of the new roles that is, going to emerge in the near future. That is something I'm pretty sure is going to come up with the evolving technology and the evolving need of, being responsible with the technology and what we do and how we implement it. So thank you. Very interesting discussion. And I'm sure people have a lot of questions. We did see some questions coming in, but because people who registered, if they've not joined right now, they listen to the recording, they'll join in later, we'll have questions. So we'll share it with you both for your answers, and we'll keep on, sending them response. I want to thank both of you for your time and your, extremely interesting exchange of, and perspectives on bringing responsible AI to organizations and our day-to-day living as well. And I want to thank all our viewers for joining us today and staying till the end. I hope you all learned something new, got a new perspective. And to all of you who've registered and joined us today, we will be emailing you a recording of this webinar. And like I mentioned, if you have any questions, please send them to info@course5i.com. And we look forward to hearing from you. Keep, following us on Course5i, and stay tuned for our future series on Course5 Compass GenAI Series. Thank you again. And thanks again, Pedro.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Megha. Thank you, Anis. It has been great to talk to you tonight. Tonight for me, and this morning for people. And hope to see you soon again. Thank you very much.
Likewise, Pedro.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.